Good morning, and we are on chapter 4 of Alma. So we're starting to move through the book quite well. Um, and we've just had a lot of wars, and we've got the Amlicites that went over to the um, people of uh, uh, the Lamanites, I should say. Interesting, the Amlicite died, but the Amlicites um, must believe in their cause or whatever so much that they go with the Lamanites. Actually, they know that there's no future of them, future among the Nephites with how they try to kill them and everything like that. I guess it'd be kind of hard to have a neighbor like that. Um, but we now kind of turned to the church more than anything, and it came to pass in the 6th year, so only 6 years of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, there were no contentions in the land of Zarahemla, but the people were afflicted, yea, greatly afflicted for the loss of their brethren, and also the loss of their flocks and herds, and their loss of their fields and grain, which were trodden underfoot and destroyed by Lamanites. Think about the end of like World War II, where uh, Germany and France and especially those that were on the front lines of those places, Normandy area and everything, there was a lot of destruction, and there was a lot that needed building up, and I don't think they could have done it alone at the time, um, but luckily people came in and helped build up. But in this sense, I don't know what structure they had, but their afflictions were great. Every soul had cause to mourn, and they believed that it was the judgments of God sent upon them because of their wickedness and abominations, wherefore they were awakened to a remembrance of their duty, and they began to establish the church more fully, and many were baptized in the waters of Sidon. There's the waters again. Last time we saw the waters, it was bodies were being thrown in there of the dead, and here is the opposite. There's people being baptized for taking away their old self and bringing a new self. And were joined to the church of God, yea, and they were baptized by the hand of Alma, who had been consecrated high priest over the people of the church by the hand of his father Alma. And it came to pass the 7th year of the reign of judges, there were about 3,500 souls that united themselves to the church of God and were baptized. Thus ended the 7th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, and there was continual peace in all the land. All that, in all that time. Sometimes I put things in my brain what's going to be said. Um, and it came to pass in the 8th year of the reign of judges. So now we're talking about 3 years, roughly, from the time they had a really, really horrible war. And I guess if we put it in our perspective, 3 years ago, we were still in the pandemic. 2021, people were still having to isolate a lot. There's still a lot of rules and regulations that would need to be done, and and so in that time, memories start to fade a little bit of what it was like. However, you are changed by it, and I think that's probably how they are. So in the 8th year of the reign of judges, the people of the church began to wax proud because of their exceeding riches and their fine silks and their fine twined linen, because of their many flocks and herds and their gold and silver and all manner of precious things which they had obtained by their industry. So it's because of how good they were doing. And all these things um, and in all these things were they lifted up in the pride of their eyes, for they began to wear very costly apparel. If you remember in chapter 1, earlier this week, it was the people outside the church who were wearing the costly apparel, and the people inside the church were imparting their substance to the poor and the needy rather than looking for what was the most expensive of things, or what was the most trendy, or whatever. I don't know how that would be said, but now it seems that the people in the church are looking at that, or at least some, and this caused much affliction to Alma and to many of the people of Alma who had consecrated, whom Alma had consecrated to be teachers and priests and elders over the church. Many of them were sorely grieved for the wickedness which they saw had begun among their people. For they saw and beheld with great sorrow the people of the church began to be lifted up in pride of their eyes, and set their hearts upon the riches and upon the vain things of the world, that they began to be scornful one towards another, and they began to persecute those who did not believe according to their own will and pleasure. So here they were. It's really amazing to think. Here's the people in the church, and I think this is something that we really have a lot to think about in our own lives as members of the church. Are there times that we persecute those that do not believe because of how we believe, according to our own will and pleasure? Do we say things that are hurtful? Are we scornful? Are we saying things? We need to be careful, because we're in a position where we have such light and knowledge. It's sometimes easy to think, oh, we have all this light and knowledge, so we're great. But we shouldn't be doing that. We should be humble and look to Jesus about how we should be, and remember that he is the one that saves us, and we're not as high and mighty as we think we are. And thus, in this 8th year of the reign of the judges, there began to be contentions among the people of the church. So, one of the things, great contentions among the people of the church. There were envyings, and strife, and malice, and persecutions, and pride, even to exceed the pride of those who did not belong to the church of God. We should always, at least in our own personal lives, I think it's really hard to judge everyone else, but if we see any of these traits, if we're contentious, even in our families, maybe we need to work on that. It's easy things to do, and can be envyings and strife, malice. Oh, I don't really like Sister so-and-so. I do like what Dr. Melissa Inouye said about being in the church. She said, we are commanded to love one another and love our enemies. We're commanded to love our enemies, and what better place to find enemies than in the church? So it's a good practice to love our enemies, and especially those that we can find in the church. And thus ended the 8th year of the reign of the judges, and the wickedness of the church was a great stumbling block to those who did not belong to the church, and thus the church began to fail in their progress. And it came to pass that in the commencement of the 9th year, Alma saw the wickedness of the church, and he saw also the example the church had began to lead to those who were unbelievers on from one piece of iniquity. Did I read that right? Yeah. The example of the church began to lead those who were unbelievers from one piece of iniquity to another, thus bringing destruction upon the people. Isn't that interesting that the church was leading that, or the wickedness of the church, those people in the church? I think it's sort of like saying, um, well, you guys aren't all that, or I don't know, it just seems like we see that in churches today, and hopefully we don't see it in our church, but there is a chance that there always is, and there's always, the church is always trying to safeguard against um, having that happen in the church. But there's always going to be that they have to guard against. Yea, he saw great iniquity among the people, some lifting themselves up to the pride, in their pride, despising others, turning their backs upon the needy. Every time it comes up to turning their backs upon the needy, and know that, and the naked, and those that were hungry, and those that were athirst, and those who were sick and afflicted, when they're when we as members turn our backs to those, it seems like that's when things start to go wrong, and we find that again in a lot of scriptures we've read. Isaiah talks about it a lot. Now this was a great cause for lamentations among the people, while others were abasing themselves, so not all of it was bad, um, succoring those who stood in need of succor, such as imparting their substance to the poor and the needy, feeding the hungry, and suffering all manner of afflictions for Christ's sake, who should come according to the spirit of prophecy. So again, the redeeming quality is imparting the substance to the poor and needy, looking forward to that day, thus retaining a remission of their sins, being filled with great joy, because of the resurrection of the dead, according to the will and power and deliverance of Christ from the bands of death. Now it came to pass that Alma, having seen the afflictions of the humble followers of Christ, and the persecutions which were heaped upon them by the remainder of the people, and seeing all their iniquity, began to be very sorrowful. Nevertheless, the Spirit did not fail him. I love that. He began to be very sorrowful. Nevertheless, the Spirit of the Lord did not fail him. I think sometimes as parents, we can see our children go one way that makes us feel sad. I think almost every parent feels this somehow, somewhere. But you can be at a point where the Spirit does not fail you. And he selected wise men among a wise man, among the elders of the church. So this is a person that was in the church he selected, and gave him power according to the voice of the people. So I'm guessing it's sort of like when we vote on someone today, it's usually somebody that was selected by a political party or something like that. And in this way, the chief judge selected someone and said, okay, you guys vote. Do you want him to be your new judge? And they voted for that. He might have power to enact the laws, and laws which had been given, put them in force according to the wickedness and crimes of the people. And this man's name was Nephi, and he was appointed chief judge, and sat upon the judgment seat to judge and to govern the people. And Alma did not grant unto him the office of high priest over the church, but he retained the office of high priest unto himself. But he delivered the judgment seat unto Nephi, and he did that. And this he did, that he himself might go forth among the people, or among the people of Nephi, that he might preach the word of God unto them. And now here's kind of a list to me. Preach the word of God unto them, to stir them up in remembrance. That's an important thing in Alma's life, because the angel, when he came down, he told them to remember the captivity of his fathers. And so he's going to stir the people up in remembrance of their duty, that he might pull down by the word of God all the pride and craftiness and contentions which were among the people, seeing no way that he might reclaim them, save it were by bearing down in pure testimony against them. And thus, in the commencement of the 9th year of the reign of the judges, so it's been 9 years, over the people of Nephi, Alma delivered up the judgment seat to Nephihah, and confined himself wholly to the high priesthood of the order of the holy order of God, in the testimony to the testimony of the word, according to the spirit of revelation and prophecy. So he went and said, okay, I'm going to continue on the path I have. One thing I like to do is, when we got a date here, so we have 9 years, I like to think, well, what's happened in our lives in 9 years? Who was President of the United States? Who was Prime Minister of England? What were the political and the social norms at the time? How much has changed since then? And when you look at that and you think, okay, well, he actually was chief judge for that time. There must have been quite an impact up to that point. Well, there's quite a few wars, actually, and a lot of change. But now he's realizing the biggest change and the most important job that he can do is to go and preach the word of God, and to testify to the people. And I hope, as we think about what we do each day, we might not give up our jobs or something just to go and preach the gospel, but some do, like missionaries, and that is the point, that they want to do the same thing. They have the Spirit of God, the Lord hasn't failed them, and they want to do that. And I hope the Spirit of the Lord doesn't fail us as we go about our day to testify and give our testimony. And I hope you have a nice day, and we will see you tomorrow.